So, um, when we think about human motivation, we usually picture it operating kind of like a marketplace. You know,
Right, like an economy of choices.
exactly. Like
Yeah.
you possess a certain amount of currency, whether that's your time, your energy, your loyalty, and you basically walk through the stalls of life shopping for the absolute best possible return on your investment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, if someone offers you $1 million with zero strings attached
Mm.
versus like $10 that requires you to completely overhaul your personality and work incredibly hard for months, it's not a difficult decision.
No, you take the million, you keep your current self totally intact, and you just walk away victorious. I mean, that's just the fundamental logic of human survival. We are biologically and psychologically wired to seek abundance.
Right.
And we definitely prefer that abundance to come with the path of least
For
resistance.
sure. But today, we're diving into a stack of notes, decoding a single, honestly fascinating source that takes that entire marketplace dynamic and just it completely flips it on its head.
It really does.
Our mission in this deep dive is to explore a specific Chassidic discourse, a memoir, that was delivered in 1971. And the goal here is to basically tear down everything you might assume about desire, motivation, and spiritual connection.
Yeah, because the source material is, well, it's a masterclass in psychological deconstruction.
Definitely. We're going to figure out why the ultimate prize isn't actually the spiritual reward you've been promised, but something infinitely more radical.
It forces you, as the listener, to really question the actual core of why you chase the things you chase, whether those things are material wealth or emotional peace or even the concept of an afterlife.
Right, even heaven itself. But to ground us, let's start where the text starts. It's tied to a specific historical moment, right? The 11th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan.
Exactly. So in biblical history, this marks the period when the Israelites were inaugurating the tabernacle in the desert. And each day, a different tribe brought a physical offering.
And the 11th day belonged to the tribe of Asher, which is key because the text immediately latches onto a linguistic detail here. The name Asher actually shares a root with the Hebrew word for happiness or praise.
And that specific idea, ultimate happiness, that becomes the philosophical anchor for literally everything that follows in this deep dive.
Okay, so how does the text define that ultimate happiness?
It posits that the ultimate happiness, like the supreme validation of the Jewish people, is rooted in a mutual choice. Basically, they chose God and God chose them.
Okay, but the logic of that mutual choice,
Yeah.
I mean, it immediately presents a massive philosophical dilemma.
Right, the asymmetry of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because for a choice to actually mean something in our everyday lives, there has to be some kind of parity between the options, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're choosing between a Honda and a Toyota, that's a real choice.
Sure, you're weighing relatively equal options that just have different advantages.
Right. But how can humanity realistically choose God over idols? Or, looking at it from the other direction, how can an infinite God choose a specific group of finite human beings over others? It's not a fair fight.
It's a completely asymmetrical equation. You're attempting to compare the infinite creator of the universe to, what, a carved piece of wood or stone?
Yeah, a statue.
And then you're comparing finite humans to other finite humans from the perspective of an entity that literally has no limits. I mean, the concept of choice almost breaks down entirely when the options are so infinitely unalike.
So, to resolve this absurdity, the source brings in a midrash, right, an ancient rabbinic parable.
Yes.
And it asks us to imagine a king who has just conquered a new city and is making his grand entrance. He arrives accompanied by his entire high-ranking court. You've got the dukes, the regional governors, the top-tier generals.
It's just the ultimate display of concentrated power.
Exactly. And naturally, the townspeople see this power structure and they scramble to align themselves with it. They're playing the political game.
Right. One citizen pledges loyalty to the Duke, assuming the Duke is going to lower his taxes. Another attaches himself to the general, looking for physical protection.
They're strategically picking the ministers. But the parable introduces one individual it calls the smart person, a paikich in Hebrew. And this individual looks at the entire procession and basically says, I'm choosing the king.
Because the ministers change, they fall out of favor, they pass away. But the king remains the king.
Okay, I have to pause here because this is where the text initially completely lost me.
Oh, really? How come?
Because when I read that parable, the smart person didn't actually sound like a genius. It just sounds like common sense. I mean, if you're at a corporate networking event and you're offered a direct mentorship by either the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or like a middle manager in regional sales.
You obviously pick the CEO.
Right. Any intern knows to bypass middle management if they have access to the top. So why is the text framing this as some profound, rare wisdom?
Okay, that's a totally fair pushback. But to see why choosing the king is actually a stroke of genius, we really have to rethink how ancient people viewed power and cosmology.
Because we tend to assume they were just naive, right?
Exactly. We look back at ancient polytheists and idol worshippers, and we picture them thinking that a literal statue they carved that morning somehow created the mountains and the oceans.
Right. We assume they just lacked basic cause and effect reasoning.
But the source argues that wasn't the case at all. Ancient people were actually highly observant. They knew there was an ultimate source, an ultimate creator.
Wait, really? They knew about the ultimate creator.
Yeah, but they believed that this ultimate God had delegated his power to maintain the universe. They thought the creator had basically handed over free will and agency to the stars, the planets, and these various spiritual forces to distribute wealth, weather, and energy down to the earth.
Ah, okay. So they viewed the universe like a massive corporation. The CEO is up in the executive suite, unreachable, totally uninvolved in the day-to-day operations. So he hands the corporate credit cards to his regional managers, like the sun, the moon, the rain gods, and basically says, you handle the local budgets.
That is the exact mindset. And the text uses a really striking metaphor to illustrate this dynamic. It compares these intermediaries, the delegated spiritual forces, to an axe in the hands of a wood chopper.
Okay, an axe and a wood chopper.
Right. So if you're a tree, the axe is the physical object making contact with you. It's doing the actual cutting. But the wood chopper is the one actually swinging it. The ultimate power lies entirely with the wood chopper.
But if the ancient people knew God was the wood chopper, why bother flattering the axe? Like, why intentionally choose the middleman if you know the CEO is the one writing the checks?
Here is where the text delivers just a staggering psychological insight. It comes down to the concept of biddle, which translates to self-nullification or just deep humility.
Self-nullification.
Yeah, getting your blessings, your wealth, or your success directly from the ultimate source of holiness requires you to actually engage with that source. You can't just take the blessing and walk away. To receive directly from the king, you have to align your will with his. You have to submit your ego.
Oh. You have to admit that you're not the center of your own universe, which, I mean, requires profound personal growth and moral accountability.
Exactly. Receiving from holiness demands that you become holy yourself. You have to be a fitting vessel for that pure energy. But the middlemen, the forces of what the text calls the other side or the unholy opposition, they operate totally differently. They give away the goods with zero moral strings attached. There's no self-nullification required. You don't have to grow. You don't have to become a better person. And you certainly don't have to surrender your ego. You just perform the required ritual and you get the material reward.
Wow. So human nature naturally gravitates toward the path of least resistance. We look at the options and basically say, keep your character development and your moral accountability. I'll just take the free cash from the middle manager.
Right. We choose the axe over the wood chopper because the axe doesn't ask us to change who we are.
The allure of the intermediary is that it lets you maintain your ego completely intact while still getting the abundance you crave. It's just a highly calculated game of cosmic economics.
It really is.
But wait, if the middleman requires no moral growth and lets you keep your ego, you would naturally assume the trade-off is a much smaller payout, right? Like a sort of convenience fee.
You would think so.
But the math of this spiritual economy works in the exact opposite way. The source reveals something pretty shocking about the sheer quantity of the reward you get from these different sources.
Yeah, this is a major paradigm shift for anyone who assumes that holiness always yields the biggest physical reward. The text explains that energy drawn from the other side, those unholy forces, is actually massive and just overwhelming in quantity.
It's like a flood of abundance. But why? Why does the unholy side have more to give?
Because it pulls from an encompassing, chaotic spiritual energy. It's totally unstructured and has no careful calculations. It really doesn't care about your personal capacity to handle the wealth or the power.
Whereas the holy side is different.
Completely. Energy that comes directly from holiness is highly restricted and measured. Holiness requires a vessel. And if the vessel, meaning the human character, isn't refined enough, too much light or too much abundance will literally shatter it.
Oh, wow.
So the ultimate source carefully tailors the blessing exactly to the hard work and the spiritual capacity of the person receiving it.
Okay, to visualize this difference, the text brings up the analogy of a king throwing a lavish banquet. Let's walk through the layout of this feast because it perfectly maps out how different people receive their energy.
Yeah, the hierarchy is fascinating.
So at the absolute bottom of the hierarchy, outside the palace walls in the dirt, you have the dogs. And the text explains that the dogs represent greedy souls who only desire physical consumption. They're constantly hungry, never satisfied, and they just receive the bones thrown out the window.
Right. And then moving slightly up the ladder, still outside, but maybe in the courtyard, you have lowly servants.
Okay.
These are individuals who serve the king, but their motivation is purely based on the fear of punishment. So they receive the leftover scraps from the kitchen.
And we finally move inside the palace. Here you find the higher servants, who serve the king out of a sense of intellectual duty and obligation. They're actually granted a portion of the actual meal inside the hall.
And finally, at the very top, you have the highest ministers. They serve the king out of pure, unadulterated love. They're seated directly at the table, sharing the intimacy of the meal with the king himself.
Okay, so if we connect this banquet back to the smart person from our very first parable, the one who chose the king over the dukes, how does this hierarchy explain their choice?
It's all about intention.
Right, because if the unholy side is tossing out massive mountains of bones to the dogs, and the king is only giving a carefully measured, restricted portion at the table, why is the smart person choosing the restricted portion?
Because the smart person understands that the intention behind the gift matters way more than the volume of the gift. Getting massive wealth from unholy sources is the equivalent of a king throwing food over his shoulder to someone he absolutely despises. The king gives it unwillingly, almost in disgust, just to shut them up and get them out of his sight. Here, take all this wealth, gorge yourself, just leave me alone.
Wow, so the sheer volume of this stuff is actually a sign of distance and rejection.
Yes. Exactly. The smart person realizes they would rather have a tiny, highly restricted portion that comes directly from the king's inner desire, from a place of intimacy, gaze, and love, than a limitless feast thrown at them in resentment.
They're choosing a deliberate connection over a dismissive payout.
Precisely.
Man, this brings us to a quote in the source material that completely stopped me in my tracks. It takes this entire philosophy of choosing the giver over the gift and pushes to its absolute most extreme logical conclusion.
Oh, the Alter Rebbe quote?
Yes, it's a declaration from the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Forbad movement, and he essentially tells God to keep heaven.
It is a breathtakingly radical statement. In a moment of just deep spiritual ecstasy, the Alter Rebbe said to the Creator, I don't want your Gan Eden, your heaven. I don't want your world to come. I only want you.
That quote feels almost dangerous to say out loud when you've been raised your entire life to believe that heaven is the ultimate finish line.
Right, it's supposed to be the goal.
It's the gold medal of human existence.
Yeah.
And he's just casually dismissing it.
To understand why he dismisses it, we have to look back at the dukes and generals from the parable. The text reveals that at the highest levels of reality, those ministers don't just represent ancient statues or rain gods. They actually represent high-level angels. They represent the Sephiroth.
Wait, for those who might not be familiar with the terminology, the Sephiroths are essentially the divine attributes or the architectural channels of spiritual energy, correct?
Yes, they are the highest, most refined spiritual realms in mystical thought. And the text is saying that even those highest realms, even heaven itself, are still just intermediaries.
Just middlemen.
Exactly. They are creations. They are byproducts of the Creator, but they are not the Creator himself. Even the most transcendent spiritual high you can achieve is still just a thing.
The source paints a really vivid architectural visual here. Imagine a sprawling, infinite palace. It contains endless outer rooms, and every single room is filled with glowing, unimaginable treasure. Most people walk through the front doors, see the treasure in the lobby, and they're utterly mesmerized.
It stopped right there.
Right. They spend their entire lives sitting on the floor, playing with the gems in the waiting room.
And in this metaphor, the lobby of the palace is Gan Eden. It is heaven.
But the wise person, the Paikich, walks into the palace, looks at the endless rooms of unimaginable spiritual treasure, completely ignores all of it, and walks straight past it into the king's private, unadorned chamber.
The wise person ignores the treasure because the text issues a very specific warning about settling for the reward. If your ultimate goal in life is to achieve a spiritual high or personal peace or even a place in heaven, you are practicing what the text calls external desire.
Meaning you want the thing, not the person.
Right. You are wanting something as a means to an end. You are valuing the gift over the giver.
You're basically still operating in the marketplace.
Hmm.
You just upgraded your currency from physical cash to spiritual real estate.
And the real danger of external desire is that eventually, inevitably, you will slip back down the ladder. Because your core motivation is still fundamentally selfish, you'll eventually start valuing the middleman again.
So how do you stop that?
To break that cycle permanently, you have to cultivate internal desire. You have to want the essence for its own sake. Not what the essence can do for you, not the tranquility it brings, not the afterlife it promises, just the essence itself.
I mean, I hear what you're saying about only wanting the essence and ignoring all the treasure, but frankly, this sounds impossible.
It does sound pretty lofty.
It sounds like an ideology designed for a monk meditating in isolation on a mountain, not someone trying to pay their mortgage, navigate a stressful career, and raise a family. Like, how is this internal desire actually supposed to function in the real world?
The text anticipates that exact pushback. It doesn't allow this concept to just remain floating in the mystical clouds. It demands that internal desire be grounded in our actual physical reality, specifically through our intellect and our daily actions.
Okay, so how do we ground it?
To explain that, the text introduces one final midrash, focusing on King David and a forgotten shepherd.
The story of the forgotten shepherd. It's incredibly poignant. The midrash describes a king who becomes furious with his flock of sheep. And in his anger, he scatters the sheep, he destroys the pen they live in, and he fires the shepherd. Just total devastation.
Right.
But eventually, his anger passes. He forgives them. He diligently rebuilds the pen, and he gathers the entire flock back together. Everything appears to be perfectly restored. But he forgets one crucial element. He forgets to rehire the shepherd.
And King David looks at this situation and prays, "The flock is gathered, the pen is built, but where is the shepherd?"
Yeah.
We have to decode this metaphor carefully, because the gathered flock and the rebuilt pen represent our physical reality being completely fixed.
Right.
It symbolizes achieving perfect physical safety, material blessings, a secure home, a stable income. It's the resolution of all our worldly anxieties.
Basically, it's the realization of the American dream, or whatever dream you're chasing. The pen is built, the sheep are safe.
But the shepherd represents something deeper. In the context of the text, the shepherd represents inner understanding. It represents the deep, profound comprehension of divine wisdom and Torah.
Right.
King David is pointing out a terrifying possibility. You can have all your physical needs met, your pen can be perfectly built, but without the shepherd, without that internal grasp of why you are here, it is entirely empty.
Because we don't just want to be well-fed sheep living comfortably in a nice pen until we die.
Exactly. The text emphasizes that this deep understanding is actually the hallmark of the Messianic era. Without the internal comprehension of the divine logic, having all the physical abundance is just a hollow victory.
It's just more stuff.
Right. We have to bring that radical, "I only want you" mindset down into our actual intellect. It can't just be a fleeting emotional high or a moment of inspiration. It has to penetrate the mind and totally alter how we process reality.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this entire deep dive, and specifically the mechanism of how we actually live this out. Because we started by talking about the drive of Asher, representing happiness, bringing a physical offering.
Yes.
And the text concludes with a staggering idea about why the ultimate choice involves the physical body of the Jewish people. You would spend all this time talking about ignoring the material treasure and ignoring the unholy abundance, which kind of makes it sound like the goal is to escape the physical world entirely and just become pure spirit.
It totally seems like that would be the logical conclusion, but the text flips the script one last time. God deliberately chose the physical body and the material world.
Why?
Because when a human being adopts that radical mindset of "I only want UF," when they bypass the intermediaries, ignore the chaotic energy of the other side, and even look past the spiritual rewards of heaven, they unlock a unique mechanism.
What kind of mechanism?
They are given the power to take physical, mundane material and completely transform its nature.
But how does that actually work in practice? Like, how do you elevate a physical object?
Let's look at a practical example. Imagine you're sitting down to eat a meal, or you're negotiating a standard business deal.
Yeah.
If you're operating on external desire, you eat merely to satisfy your physical hunger, or you close the deal solely to inflate your bank account and your ego. The act remains purely physical. It just ends with your consumption.
Right, the dead end.
But if you operate with internal desire, your motivation shifts entirely. You eat so that you have the biological energy to perform an act of goodness. You negotiate the business deal to create a structure of justice, employment, and charity in your community.
You recognize that the food or the money is a divine gift, and by using it for a higher purpose, you turn the physical act of digestion or the signing of a contract into a spiritual conduit.
Exactly. You're no longer taking the king's treasure and running away to enjoy it selfishly in the lobby. You're taking the raw materials of the physical world, elevating them, and bringing them directly into the king's private chamber.
You make the physical world itself a home for the divine.
That is the true happiness of Asher. It's the ability to live fully engaged in the material world, working, eating, building, without ever being captured by it, because your internal compass is locked onto the only essence that never changes.
Man, that reframes the entire purpose of being alive. And if we connect this back to your daily life, the listener tuning in right now, it leaves us with a really provocative new lens to view our modern habits.
Definitely.
Because, I mean, we don't really struggle with ancient statues or rain gods anymore. But think about the technology in your pocket. Think about the algorithms that govern our
The
attention.
modern intermediaries.
Exactly. Our smartphones and our endless social media feeds, just the newest version of the woodchopper's axe.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Because they offer us massive, chaotic, unstructured abundance, endless dopamine hits, constant visual validation, just a fire hose of information with absolutely zero moral strings attached.
Right, they demand no self-nullification, no humility, and zero personal growth.
We are settling for the chaotic payout of the middle manager every single time we open our screens, entirely avoiding the quiet, restricted discipline required to connect with something real.
It's the bones thrown out the window.
Exactly. But you have the ability to walk past the distractions and step directly into the ultimate reality. You can choose the woodchopper. You just have to be willing to put down the axe.